Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's do another chapter here. Chapter 9 of the wonderful Through a Misted Glass by Dr. David Marsh. I wanted to mix this one in here because of my last video being taken down. Not a lot of you were able to see the latest chapter there, so I thought I would put this one in a little bit ahead of time so that way once again you get to enjoy another long chapter associated with this book. Once again, I'm going to include the link as well in case you wanted to download the book, read it on your own. It's completely free, no strings attached, and then that way you get to read all of the chapters associated with it. This one has to do with an island, a cursed island. In fact, when I was reading the information, not just back then, but once again now, it reminded me of that infamous island from Lord of the Flies. Is it truly haunted? Is it something supernatural? Is it pretty much just playing on people's minds? Like, are they literally making it up themselves? Who knows? This is, again, one of those islands that still has a lot of mystery, and I'd love to hear what your comments are on this after I finish the chapter. I'll give my own as well. So let's go ahead and let's feature chapter 9 here from the book, and this is what it has to say. Depending on who you speak to, Pamira Island is either an isolated Pacific paradise or hell-cursed rock of death. Pamira is actually an atoll located about 1,000 nautical miles south-southwest of Hawaii, placing it almost exactly in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It measures approximately 1.5 miles in length by a half-mile wide and is one of literally thousands of such specks that dot the ocean. It has the classic circular shape, a shallow lagoon in the center, and several vegetation-covered islets around this lagoon. Pamira is not near any shipping lanes, so it has largely remained remote and deserted. Local fauna consists of mosquitoes and other insects, lizards, land and coconut crabs, a huge bird population, and until 2011, a large population of non-indigenous rats. The islands have palm, coconut trees, and mangrove bushes forming a thick jungle. The coral reef and lagoons at Pamira are a breeding ground for gray and black-tip reef sharks. Pamira has a tragic history that began with discovery in 1798 by American Captain Edmund Fanning while his ship the Betsy was on its way to Asia. The tale of discovery of Pamira is a sinister one at best. Captain Fanning was disturbed from sleep 3 times by strong, vivid premonitions of danger or threat. He finally decided sleep wasn't possible and went out on deck where he ordered the helmsman to heave into the darkness. At dawn, the crew spotted the reef of Pamira Island lying dead ahead that would have ripped the bottom out of the Betsy and sent her to the bottom had the ship not have been stopped. Another American captain named Swale, who shipped to Pamira, was blown off course in a storm that pushed it onto the island, happened back in 1802. It is to Swale that the credit of discover for the island wrongfully goes to him, as he reported the island to maritime authorities where Fanning only logged his sighting. In 1816, the Esperanza, a Spanish pirate ship loaded with gold and silver plunder from Incan temples in South America, came under attack from another vessel, and a fierce battle followed. Several crew members that managed to survive the fight sailed off with the treasure only to strike the reef at Pamira. As that ship was sinking, they managed to transfer the treasure to the island. There they remained stranded for a year and supposedly buried the Inca gold under a tree somewhere on Pamira. They then built 2 rafts and attempted sail to civilization. One raft was later rescued by an American whaling ship with only a single survivor left aboard who later died of pneumonia. The other raft was never heard from again. In 1855, a whaling ship was reported wrecked on Pamira's dangerous reefs, but neither the ship nor its crew were found. Judge Henry E. Cooper of Hawaii became owner of the island in 1911 for the amount of $750. He eventually sold all but one small islet called Home Island, believing that the priceless Inca artifacts of gold and silver remained buried there. Ownership of the rest of Palmyra eventually went to the Fullard Leo family in 1922, which in 1940 became entangled in a legal battle with the United States government over ownership. The United States wanted Palmyra in anticipation of World War II in the Pacific theater of war. Pamira became a base of operations for air attacks against Japan, servicing long-range air patrols and submarine missions. Gun emplacements, ammunition and fuel dumps, abandoned equipment, bunkers, underground tunnels and buildings, and what is left of the old landing strip remain to this day. Many of the U.S. military personnel who served there said the island had a reputation for bad luck. Planes would be unable to find the island and then crash into the sea. Planes leaving the island would become disoriented and then fly the wrong way, and other mishaps plagued the island base. In 1974, the grisly double murder of Muff Graham of San Diego, and then according to Vincent Berliosa's book And the Sea Will Tell, the Grahams have ventured to Pamira for an extended stay of up to a year, but most likely they were killed for their expensive sailboat, the Sea Wind, and the large cache of food stores it contained. Ex-convict and fugitive Buck Walker and his girlfriend Stephanie Stearns were later tried for the murders. Walker was convicted and received a life sentence, while Stearns was acquitted. Walker and Stearns had sailed from Hawaii to Palmyra on a small, poorly outfitted boat and had taken up residence there. It would not be until 6 years after the murders that the skeletal remains of Muff Graham, spilling out of an old, rusted, and barnacled Navy container, were discovered washed ashore on Palmyra by South African sailors Sharon and Robert Jordan during their own trip to the island in 1981. Mac's body remains missing. In 1977, sailor Amanda Lane and 4 friends, while sailing to Hawaii from Micronesia, made a stop in Pamira but were frightened off of the island after the first night by a group of strange quote-unquote hippies who had made Palmyra their home. Lane stated that she and her group quickly left the island after the hippie told them a bizarre story about the mysterious fate that one member of their party had suffered. In 1981, John Harrison, a Canadian yachtsman, along with his 2 daughters, became marooned on Palmyra after their sailboat was struck by a typhoon and lost its mast. With the help of fuel airdropped to them by the Coast Guard, Harrison and his daughters managed to motor the damaged boat to Palmyra. They lived on what could be salvaged from their vessel, fish, coconuts, and canned goods supplied by Pamira's self-appointed caretaker Ray Landrum. They remained on Pamira for over a month while the United States and Canadian governments argued over who should be responsible for rescuing the castaways. They were eventually airlifted out after spending days clearing the old runway on the island. In 1987, after acting on a tip from a fishing vessel, a Coast Guard C-130 aircraft sighted a sailboat just southeast of Palmyra. An aerial inspection revealed no sign of life on board the drifting sailboat, and Coast Guard personnel noted that the mast was broken and that the sails were shredded. A week after the sighting, the vessel was boarded by the Coast Guard, who found the skeletal remains of owner Manning Edward aboard. The cause of death was undetermined, and before leaving on his 3-year voyage throughout the Pacific, Manning had spoken about his plans to visit Palmyra. In 1989, another sailboat named the Sea Dreamer was traveling from San Diego to Hawaii and was caught in a storm that pushed her far off course and onto Pamira Island. After a brief stay on the island, the boat again departed for Hawaii, but then completely disappeared. An extensive search by the Coast Guard between Palmyra and Hawaii, going as far as the west coast of the United States, failed to turn up any trace of the ill-fitted boat or of its 4 crew members. To read more about Pamira's sinister history, I suggest a book by Kurt Rowlett entitled The Curse of Pamira Island, available at lulu.com. This is the story of Kurt and Una Vanderpeet, who, in their 50-foot catamaran sailboat called Vander, were caught in a storm and blown to Pamira. The tale of the 6 days they spent on the island repairing their boat is chilling and ominous to hear. Both Kurt and Una were experienced sailors and boat builders who had many years of worldwide sea voyages between them. They had sailed the Vander from Holland across the Atlantic, around South America, and into the Pacific, visiting Australia, the Philippines, Indonesia, Hawaii, and a variety of other stops before sailing north for Japan. The storm caught them, and for several harrowing days, they fought to keep the boat and themselves from sinking. At some point, the boat struck something barely submerged in the water and then sprang a leak. The leak was temporarily brought under control, but would have to be repaired as soon as possible. To Kurt and Una, Pamira was heaven sent when they first saw it. The lagoon, shallow as it was, but still navigable by the catamaran, offered a safe harbor where they could beach the boat and then repair the leak. They finally found the channel into the lagoon and beached the boat on a spit of sand just inside the harbor on Home Island. It was late in the afternoon of the first day as the two surveyed the damage to their beached boat, and that Una saw someone standing just inside the trees. She told Kurt, who looked but did not see that person. Kurt decided that it might be best to take a look around before they committed to repairs. And so the two set off into the desert, into the dense jungle. They could hear many birds in the trees and saw some of the long-abandoned military hardware as they made their way along. Then they came across a well-used path through the jungle. They retreated to the beach and decided to walk as much of the beach as they could, hoping another boat was anchored somewhere and that the crew could be contacted. Dusk was fast approaching, causing the couple to abort their trip, and they returned to the boat to eat, sleep, and explore a bit tomorrow before effecting those repairs. Later that night, they awoke to the sounds of people fighting, yelling, harsh words, and the sounds of physical violence. Kurt went on deck, but there were no lights and no one could be seen. Kurt and Una slept fitfully that night. And so the next morning, Kurt and Una got an early start and explored the island. They would not go to all the other islands that ring the lagoon, but were fairly certain that no other boat was anchored at Pamira. By now it was noon, and both thought it was best to make repairs and sail as soon as possible, and so they returned to the boat. Even as they approached Vander, they could tell something was amiss. There in the sand by the boat looked like some kind of drawing of a strange symbol. Kurt said someone had to have drawn it, but Una wasn't sure. To her, it could have been done by crabs or birds, but Kurt was furious and Una was frightened. Kurt was bound and determined to find out who was on that island with them. He took a gaffing hook and then marched off into the jungle. Una stayed behind and kept watch over the boat. Kurt was gone 2 hours before Una began to panic. She stayed on deck watching and waiting. Then she called out, hoping Kurt might answer, but the only reply was the wind in the palm trees. Hours later, Kurt came back. He looked a little shaken and told Una she needed to see what he had seen over on Cooper Island where the old airfield was. It was late, but Kurt assured her that there was no one on the island. And so they made the long trek to Cooper, and in the fading light of sunset, Kurt showed her a message carved in the wall of an old building. It said, "We came here to escape a storm. 3 weeks and we cannot leave this cursed hunk of coral. Save yourself. Leave if you can before the island traps you. RC and BC 1989. Kurt then showed Una what he thought were 3 graves, long mounds of earth with stick markers at one end. They quickly headed back to their boat. That night, both would have a great deal of trouble sleeping, the wind sounding like the moans of the dying as it moved through the trees and the seagrass. The next day began early, both Kurt and Una working as fast as they could to fix that damaged boat. Both also kept a wary eyes on the trees and other islands. They came to a point where they needed a timber for repairs. They lacked one of the correct dimensions, so Kurt would have to find an appropriate tree in the jungle and then cut it down to fabricate the timber. He insisted that Una stay on the boat. He grabbed his gear and then walked up the trail into the jungle. Una sat on the stern of the boat and watched sharks prowl the lagoon. Twice she thought she saw someone at the edge of the trees. Once she thought she heard a woman scream. As twilight approached, Una grew more apprehensive. This task should not have taken so much time. Suddenly the birds stopped making noise, the winds died off, and there was no sound of the breakers on the reefs. It became deathly still. Una stated that the air became thick and felt chilly. This lasted for approximately a half hour, but not before Una heard what she swears was a voice repeating the message she and Kurt had read on the building. Just as suddenly, all the noise returned. Una couldn't take it anymore and decided to go find Kurt. And so she jumped onto the beach with a flashlight and headed into the jungle. She was immediately surrounded by sounds, rustling in the palms, skittering sounds on the ground, and the cacophony of the night birds as they started their nightly routine. Once she thought she felt something slither across her foot. She held her calm and proceeded along the old roads looking for Kurt. She came to the road that cuts the lagoon almost in half and leads to Cooper Island, but she was unsure if she should go there or continue on around the island the long way. She can't remember why, but she chose the long way and set off towards Hole Island. Meanwhile, Kurt had been in the opposite direction on Home Island, where he had found a stack of old wood that was rotted at the ends, but once trimmed could be serviceable. He decided to cut all the spare dunnage and planks he could and was on his way back to the boat with his first load. Unknown to him, Una was headed off in the opposite direction, and so he returned to the boat finding Una gone. He started hollering her name around the deck, hoping she hadn't gone far. Una, now more than halfway around the island, could not hear him. She had stumbled on an old gun emplacement and what appeared to be a bunker in the ground. She thought she could hear voices within. She hesitated, knowing she should return to the boat, but one voice sounded like Kurt's, and so she called out, but the voices continued without seeming to hear her, and she steadied her nerves, shining the flashlight carefully around, and then entered that bunker. Kurt grabbed another flashlight and took off to find Una. When he came to the road that led to Cooper Island, he took it. He ran as fast as he could, believing he saw a flashlight across the lagoon, and just as he reached the other side that he was intent on where he had seen the other flashlight, he failed to watch his step and then fell into a hole. Una had gone perhaps 5 feet into the bunker and realized there was no light. She also realized the voices were caused by wind in the bunker, and so she made her way back out. She tried a shortcut through the grass when suddenly roosting daybirds, disturbed by her light, took flight. Their wings and cries disoriented and frightened her, and so she screamed and then ran. Kurt lay in the hole a moment, and he had now twisted his ankle. He thought he had heard a woman scream, but knew that the wind sometimes sounded like that, and with Una missing, he couldn't ignore that sound, and despite the pain in his ankle, he jumped up and then ran to where he thought that sound came from, Cooper Island landing strip. And so Uma stopped running, now disoriented. The night was moonless, but the sky was filled with stars. She sought to regain her composure and determined where the boat was. She would go back and then hope Kurt would return. Kurt, now in agonizing pain, ran onto the old airstrip. He called to Una, but there was no answer. He found a branch to use as a crutch and then hobbled along, calling Una's name and searching the airfield and surrounding areas. He searched half the way to Strawn Island when he decided to go back. As he turned, there were 25 meters behind him. That's when he saw a figure. It was dark, but in the light of stars, Kurt could see that the figure was clearly there. He shined his light on the person and gasped. Before him stood a tall, gaunt man, nearly a skeleton as he was very thin. He had long, dirty, stringy hair and beard, and his clothes were in tatters. The man stared back with wild eyes. He slowly raised his arm, pointed a bony finger at Kurt, and tilted his head back, screaming, "You should have left. You'll carry the island curse with you forever." And so Kurt raised the gaffing hook, but the other man turned and ran, disappearing into the jumble of old military cast-offs, laughing maniacally. Kurt was on edge and was now twice as frantic to find Una. After over an hour of continued searching, he knew he would need daylight to look any further, so he headed back to the boat. Una made several wrong turns, but eventually wound up back on the trail to the boat. She walked carefully, calling Kurt's name and searching for any sign of him, but her flashlight was growing dim and she had little time to search. Once at the boat, she saw Kurt's flashlight as he came across the road that bisected the bay. She was so happy to see the beam of light that she cried. She went back ashore and started a fire, something she now realized she should have done from the start. That's when she noticed the wood Kurt had dropped off and knew he was all right. Kurt made his way along the path and saw the glimmer of fire towards the boat. He hobbled along faster, praying it was Una that had made the fire and not some hooligans setting the boat on fire. His arrival at the boat was a great relief to both of them. Una fretted over Kurt's twisted ankle and went about rendering first aid and then prepared some food. As they ate, Kurt told her of the strange thin man. "What does that mean, we will carry the curse of the island with us?" she asked. Kurt said he had no idea, but thought the man was clearly mental and most likely dangerous. Una became scared, but Kurt was resolved to keep that man at bay. They decided to fix the boat at first light and then leave as fast as they could. The repairs would take several hours, but both of them wanted to get as far from Pamira as possible. The next morning they were greeted by heavy rain which hampered the repairs. Wind lashed the tiny island and lightning and thunder filled the sky. Kurt rigged the catch system to fill the boat's fresh water supply, and both he and Una steadily worked on fixing the boat. It was hard and exhausting labor. As night settled, the storm passed, but they were still hours away from being able to leave. Kurt vowed to make and keep a fire on the beach all night. Both reflected on the night before and considered just how far their imaginations had taken them. The man was a problem, but hadn't attempted any harm, so they would hurry the repairs and leave in peace. They would tell the authorities of the strange man when they reached civilization. They had a strong sense that something about this island was foreboding and sinister, but both would leave themselves capable enough to fix the boat and then leave unharmed. They slept as best as they could, Kurt going often to keep the fire burning. Once during the night, Kurt thought he saw movement just out of the range of the firelight, but otherwise the night passed quietly. The next morning broke bright and clear, a light onshore breeze keeping the little island a comfortable temperature. However, it was also good weather for the mosquitoes, and they plagued the couple as they worked. They would have their repairs completed by evening. Kurt found several of the timbers he had scavenged unusable, and so when he cut into them to shape them to fit, something he could only find as he worked, there were many false starts on the repairs. As she was bringing a piece of wood to Kurt, Una noticed the strange symbol in the sand had been redrawn and called to Kurt. She also noticed human footprints leading to and from the boat. Kurt said it may have been his prints, but where from where he went to the jungle to relieve himself, but he wasn't certain. Una placed her foot next to a print. The print was much larger than her foot. Kurt did the same, and his foot too was smaller than that print. This new development unnerved the couple. The crazy man had been extremely close to the boat and in broad daylight. They kept a constant eye on the jungle as they worked faster to make ready to put to sea. At this point, they had only to wait for the caulking to dry, apply some anti-fouling paint, and then set sail. This would take time, however, and they didn't want to spend another night here. Between the hidden rot in the salvaged wood, watching for the mysterious intruder, and the hungry mosquitoes, their nerves were shot. And so the wind strengthened, and with it, afternoon temperatures came up, driving the mosquitoes back into the jungle. They could see clouds gathering on the horizon. It would rain, possibly even storm, violently tonight. There would be no departure until tomorrow, and so Kurt resolved to stand watch with the only weapon they had, a flare gun. Una cooked dinner and sat with Kurt on the deck as the rain clouds let loose. They had rigged a rain tarp, collecting more water to supply the boat with, and the sound of rain was almost hypnotic on the tarp. Strong winds and torrential rains swept over the island well until next morning. Kurt examined the boat holes at first light and determined they would need to apply one more coat of bottom paint to be certain they would leave safely. And so he worked quickly and had the task done in half an hour. Una sat in the stern drinking her coffee and also watching for that strange man. And so Kurt began gathering up the materials from the beach, making ready to catch the tide and leave. He had less than an hour to do so. Una was stowing gear and coiling the lines they had used to tie the boat to shore, leaving only the stern lines attached to anchors embedded in the bottom of the lagoon several meters behind the boat. These would be used to pull the boat back into the water at high tide. As she took the last of the gear Kurt handed her, she glanced up in time to see the crazy man charging down the path, a long spear-like chunk of pipe in his hands aimed at Kurt's back. Una screamed out a warning just in time, and Kurt turned on the man. They struggled briefly, and the crazy man retreated into the jungle. Kurt climbed aboard, and they waited the tense 30 minutes to high tide. They could feel the boat lifting and knew it wouldn't be too long. The crazy man appeared again, screaming unintelligible words as he sought to climb aboard. Kurt repelled him several times, Una hauling on the anchor leads, desperately trying to pull the boat free. Kurt hit the man with an oar from their sea kayak, but it seemed to have no effect. Then, simultaneously, the boat began to pull free of the sand, and the crazy man grabbed a burning piece of wood from the fire and charged the boat. They were now several feet out into the lagoon, but the crazy man was bent on burning that wooden boat. Kurt was forced to aim the flare gun at the crazy man, and so the man kept charging, and Kurt pulled the trigger. The flare struck the man, and he dropped the burning frond. To Kurt's amazement, the man cast off the burning flare and stood staring at them as Una started the boat and backed away further, hauling in the anchor lines, and Kurt reloaded and stood staring back at that crazy man. Then the crazy man started laughing maniacally and screamed that they could never escape the curse of the island and that they would die as the crazy man's friends had. Kurt went to help haul in the anchors, and Uma held the boat, taking them out into the narrow channel and into the sea beyond. The last image of the crazy man was of him standing by their campfire, screaming and now pulling his hair. 3 weeks later, they saw and hailed a British Navy vessel. They dutifully reported the incident, which was passed on to the U.S. Navy. Within a year, the island would be declared a national marine monument, and boats and visitors would be restricted. The new tenants, the Nature Conservancy, would land on the island, but no one found any sign of the crazy man or any sign of current habitation. For Kurt and Una, the nightmare wasn't over. No one believed their story, yet every so often they would see the spectral image of the crazy man just before something bad would happen, such as the sudden death of Una's father and the unexpected auto accident in Holland that nearly cost them their lives. These mishaps and more happened often and left both with emotional and mental scars. To this day, they will tell you that they made a big mistake stopping at Pamira Island. And then that's it. That's everything associated with this very long but good chapter within Chapter 9 of Through a Misted Glass. So let's go ahead and let's talk about that here. First off, interesting story, right? When I told you it would be a cursed island, it definitely was. There was that long set of paragraphs that Dr. David Marsh placed involving all those incidences from people being lost, from people being missing, boats being found like capsized or destroyed, people never found, and so on. Makes you wonder how long this history is with the island. It reminded me of Skull Island, the infamous island associated with King Kong and now the Godzilla lore. And when I was mentioning earlier about this almost being like Lord of the Flies, it makes you wonder like how much of it was truly real and then how much of it was imagined. Because this man, this crazy man, the guy with the long hair, the guy with the scraggly beard, he almost seemed to be out of nowhere. Now there could be the notion that maybe he was just some unlucky fellow, one of those people that was missing, that ended up actually being there on that island for so long, being there by himself, losing his friends. Maybe it was him that dug those graves and then placed those makeshift tombs on there. But in that case, maybe he went mad. Maybe he truly went crazy from being isolated for so long and realizing that he was going to be stuck there forever. So to him, finding these other people there, maybe he in turn thought they were made up and vice versa. But there's that notion. And then of course there's the idea that this is truly like a supernatural island. Like there's something wrong with this island, something very foreboding, and it creates these things out of thin air. In this case, it being this crazy man, but also almost like the timed coincidental events involving those storms. Each time that couple, Kurt and Una, were going to try to leave, they couldn't. All of a sudden there would be a storm happening and it would cause their repairs to be hampered. And then when that would occur, it would mean more chance for this crazy guy, this crazy man, to be able to be there. The fact that it leads more curses is that strange symbol, which was never fully explained because obviously the couple didn't know what it was about. But that strange symbol that kept popping up, was it a symbol of something sinister, like some kind of curse whenever that symbol is nearby? Obviously it was placed several times, so there is some significance associated with it. But otherwise, again, makes you think that there's something more ominous associated with that island. The fact also that later on it became a national marine monument, and then that island, that Pamira Island, had other people visit it, but they found no sign of that crazy man or anyone else. It again makes you think that he was made up out of thin air. Now there is a chance too that this poor guy ended up actually dying, and then probably dying somewhere there on the island to never be found again, and that's why he was never found on the subsequent expeditions. But there also could be the idea that, nope, that he was not there at all, ever to begin with. Truly creepy stuff. Again, straight from Lord of the Flies, whenever you have that pig, remember that pig that was cut off and then started talking to Simon, had its head cut off, placed on a pike, and then the both of them started to have a conversation. Makes you wonder again what was real and what wasn't. Let me know what you guys think. Chapter 9, pretty good chapter, probably the longest one within the book. Love to hear what your comments are. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.